You know his name. You've used his creation. You've probably received an Amazon package in the last week. But do you really understand how Jeff Bezos thinks? Do you know the mental frameworks that transformed a small online bookstore into one of the most valuable companies in human history? Do you understand the thought patterns that built an empire worth over $1 trillion? Most people see Jeff Bezos as lucky, ruthless, or simply in the right place at the right time. They're wrong. Bezos didn't stumble into success. He engineered it through a specific way of thinking that you can learn and apply to your own life and business. For the next hour, we're going inside Jeff Bezos' head. Not to worship him or copy his exact strategies, but to understand the mental models, decision-making frameworks, and thinking patterns that created unprecedented success. By the end of this audiobook, you'll think differently about customers, time, risk, and opportunity. Jeff Bezos was born in 1964 in Albuquerque, New Mexico. His early life was marked by intellectual curiosity and an obsession with building things. As a child, he took apart his crib with a screwdriver because he wanted a real bed. He built alarm systems to keep his siblings out of his room. He graduated valedictorian of his high school class and went on to study electrical engineering and computer science at Princeton. But here's what's interesting. Bezos didn't start Amazon because he loved books or wanted to be a retailer. He started Amazon because he recognized a pattern that others missed. In 1994, while working as a vice president at a hedge fund, he came across a statistic that changed his life. Internet usage was growing at 2,300% per year. Most people saw this as an interesting fact. Bezos saw it as the foundation of a new economy. This is the first glimpse into how Bezos thinks. He doesn't just see information, he sees implications. He doesn't just notice trends, he extrapolates them into the future. He doesn't just identify opportunities, he builds entire business models around them. The decision to leave his lucrative Wall Street job and start an online bookstore wasn't impulsive. Bezos had a framework for making major life decisions that he called the regret minimization framework. He would project himself forward to age 80 and ask, "Will I regret not trying this?" The answer was clear. He knew he could always get another job on Wall Street, but he might never get another chance to participate in the early days of the internet. This thinking pattern, considering long-term regret over short-term comfort, would become a defining characteristic of everything Bezos built. While other entrepreneurs focused on quarterly results, Bezos was thinking in decades. While competitors worried about immediate profits, Bezos was building infrastructure for the future. Amazon's first office was Bezos' garage. His desk was literally a door from Home Depot mounted on 4 pieces of wood. But even in those early days, his thinking was sophisticated and systematic. He didn't just want to sell books online. He wanted to build the everything store. He didn't just want to compete with existing bookstores. He wanted to create an entirely new category of commerce. The mental model that drove this ambition was simple but profound. Start with the customer and work backwards. Instead of asking, "What can we sell?" Bezos asked, "What do customers want?" Instead of thinking, "How can we make money?" he thought, "How can we create value?" This customer-centric thinking wasn't just a nice philosophy. It was the strategic foundation that would guide every major decision Amazon made. Today, Jeff Bezos is one of the wealthiest people in human history. Amazon is one of the most valuable companies ever created. AWS powers a third of the internet. Amazon employs over 1.5 million people worldwide. But none of this happened by accident. It happened because Bezos developed and consistently applied specific ways of thinking about business, customers, competition, and time. These thinking patterns aren't mysterious or magical. They're learnable, applicable, and transferable to any business or career. For the next hour, we're going to dissect them, understand them, and show you how to apply them to your own goals and challenges. Welcome inside Jeff Bezos' head. Let's discover how the man who built tomorrow actually thinks. Core thinking pattern 1. Customer obsession, the North Star principle. If you want to understand Jeff Bezos' mind, you have to start with his most fundamental belief. Customers are the only thing that matter. Not competitors, not shareholders, not even employees. Customers. This isn't just corporate speak or marketing philosophy. This is the actual operating system that runs inside Bezos' head. Most business leaders say they're customer-focused. Bezos is genuinely customer-obsessed. The difference is profound. Customer-focused means you consider customers when making decisions. Customer-obsessed means you make decisions exclusively based on what's best for customers, even when it costs you money, pisses off investors, or creates short-term problems. Here's how this obsession manifests in Bezos' thinking. Every decision, every meeting, every strategic discussion starts with the customer. Amazon has a practice where they literally leave an empty chair in important meetings to represent the customer voice. When someone proposes a new feature, product, or policy, the first question isn't, will this make money? Or, can we build this? The first question is, how does this benefit customers? This customer obsession drives behaviors that seem irrational to traditional business thinking. Amazon famously operates at thin margins, sometimes losing money on individual transactions. Traditional retailers think this is stupid. Bezos thinks it's strategic. His mental model is simple. If you take care of customers, everything else takes care of itself. Happy customers buy more, stay longer, and tell their friends. Unhappy customers do the opposite. But Bezos' customer obsession goes deeper than just making customers happy. He's obsessed with understanding what customers want before they know they want it. This requires a specific type of thinking that most people never develop. Instead of asking customers what they want, which often produces unreliable answers, Bezos watches what they do and extrapolates what they might want in the future. For example, customers never asked for one-day delivery. They never requested voice-activated shopping through Alexa. They never demanded a subscription service that bundled shopping, streaming, and shipping. But Bezos could see the underlying desires: convenience, speed, simplicity, and value. He built solutions for needs that customers felt but couldn't articulate. This type of customer thinking requires what Bezos calls divine discontent, the ability to look at any customer experience and see how it could be better. Most people see an acceptable experience and move on. Bezos sees an acceptable experience and becomes obsessed with making it excellent. Most people focus on what's working. Bezos focuses on what could work better. Here's a concrete example of how this thinking works. In the early 2000s, Amazon's customer service was good, but not great. Customers had to navigate phone trees, wait on hold, and often got transferred multiple times. The experience was industry standard, but not customer obsessed. Bezos looked at this process and asked a simple question: what if we made it easier for customers to reach us than any other company in the world? This led to innovations like one-click customer service callbacks, live chat support, and eventually proactive customer service where Amazon contacts customers before they even know there's a problem. These innovations cost money and required significant technology investment, but they created customer loyalty that became a competitive moat that competitors still can't cross. The customer obsession framework also shapes how Bezos thinks about competition. Most CEOs spend significant time studying competitors, trying to match their features, beat their prices, or copy their strategies. Bezos rarely talks about competitors in internal meetings. His mental framework is, if you're focused on customers, competitors become irrelevant. If you're building something customers truly love, competition takes care of itself. This doesn't mean Bezos ignores competition. It means he views competition through a customer lens. When a competitor launches a new feature, Bezos doesn't ask, how do we match this? He asks, does this make the customer experience better? And if so, how can we do it better? When competitors cut prices, Bezos doesn't automatically match prices. He asks, are customers getting better value? And how can we provide even more value? The customer obsession also drives Amazon's famous willingness to cannibalize its own products. When Kindle was succeeding as a hardware business, Amazon could have protected those margins by limiting ebook options or maintaining high prices. Instead, Bezos pushed for cheaper ebooks, even when it hurt Kindle hardware sales. His reasoning: customers wanted cheaper books, so Amazon should give them cheaper books, even if it meant less profit per transaction. This thinking pattern, optimizing for customer benefit even at the expense of short-term profits, is incredibly difficult for most business leaders to adopt. It requires a level of long-term thinking and customer trust that feels risky and counterintuitive. But Bezos has seen this strategy work over and over again. Every time Amazon prioritizes customer benefit over short-term profit, customer loyalty increases, which drives long-term profits. Here's how you can apply customer obsession thinking to your own business or career. Start every decision by asking, how does this benefit the people I serve? Whether you're an employee serving internal customers, an entrepreneur serving external customers, or a freelancer serving clients, this framework clarifies priorities and drives better decisions. Customer obsession isn't just a business strategy. It's a way of thinking that can transform any profession or industry. When you become genuinely obsessed with serving others better, you stop competing and start innovating. You stop defending what you have and start building what others need. You stop thinking like everyone else and start thinking like Jeff Bezos. Core thinking pattern 2. Day 1 mentality. The anti-complacency mindset. Jeff Bezos has an unusual relationship with success. Most people who build trillion-dollar companies would be satisfied, even complacent. Bezos operates from the opposite mindset. The more successful Amazon becomes, the more he thinks like a startup founder facing extinction. This isn't paranoia. It's a deliberate mental framework he calls Day 1 thinking. In Bezos's mind, every day at Amazon is Day 1. Not Day 1,000 or Day 10,000, even though Amazon has been operating for over 25 years. Day 1. This seemingly simple concept drives behaviors and decisions that perplex outsiders, but create competitive advantages that competitors can't replicate. Day 1 thinking means operating with the urgency, curiosity, and customer focus of a startup, regardless of your company's size, resources, or market position. It means making decisions quickly, experimenting constantly, and staying obsessed with what customers want rather than defending what you've already built. Most companies naturally evolve from Day 1 to what Bezos calls Day 2. Day 2 companies become bureaucratic, slow, and focused on processes rather than outcomes. They start defending market share instead of creating new markets. They optimize for comfort rather than growth. They focus on what competitors are doing rather than what customers need. According to Bezos, Day 2 is followed by stagnation, irrelevance, and eventually corporate death. Here's how Day 1 thinking manifests in Bezos's decision-making. He makes decisions with what he calls high-velocity decision-making. Most large companies slow down decision-making as they grow, requiring multiple approvals, extensive analysis, and consensus building. Bezos deliberately keeps decision-making fast, even when Amazon could afford to be more deliberate. His framework for this is simple. Most decisions are two-way doors, reversible decisions that can be changed if they don't work out. For two-way door decisions, speed matters more than perfection. Make the decision quickly with 70% of the information you'd ideally want, then course correct if necessary. Only one-way door decisions, irreversible decisions with major consequences, require extensive analysis and slow deliberation. This decision-making framework prevents the analysis paralysis that kills innovation in large organizations. While competitors are studying market research and building consensus, Amazon is experimenting, learning, and iterating. This speed advantage compounds over time, allowing Amazon to test more ideas, learn faster, and adapt quicker than larger, slower competitors. Day one thinking also shapes how Bezos approaches failure. Most established companies become risk averse as they grow, protecting their existing success rather than risking failure for potential breakthroughs. Bezos operates from the opposite philosophy. If you're not failing, you're not experimenting hard enough. If your success rate is too high, you're playing it too safe. Amazon's history is littered with expensive failures. The Fire Phone, Amazon Auctions, Amazon Destinations, and dozens of other products and services that never gained traction. Most CEOs would be embarrassed by this failure rate. Bezos celebrates it because failure means Amazon is pushing boundaries and experimenting at the edges of what's possible. His mental model for failure is sophisticated. Failure is expensive in the short term, but cheap in the long term. Not trying new things is cheap in the short term, but expensive in the long term. Companies that avoid failure to protect short-term profits end up failing permanently when markets change and they can't adapt. The day one mentality also prevents what Bezos calls proxy worship, focusing on metrics rather than the reality those metrics represent. As companies grow, they often become obsessed with key performance indicators, market research data, and financial metrics. These proxies for customer satisfaction can become substitutes for actual customer satisfaction. Bezos trains himself and his leadership team to resist proxy worship by staying connected to real customer experiences. He still reads customer emails, participates in customer service calls, and regularly uses Amazon's products as a regular customer would. This direct customer contact prevents the disconnect that often develops between senior executives and customer reality. Day one thinking requires what Bezos calls disagree and commit. In traditional corporate culture, teams spend enormous time building consensus before making decisions. Day one thinking prioritizes speed over consensus. Team members can disagree with a decision, but commit fully to executing it once the decision is made. This allows for faster decision-making while maintaining team alignment. Here's a practical example. When Amazon was deciding whether to build Echo and Alexa, there was significant internal disagreement. Many executives thought Amazon shouldn't enter the hardware business. Others questioned whether voice interfaces would become mainstream. Rather than spending months building consensus, Bezos made the decision to proceed, and the entire team committed to making it successful, regardless of their initial reservations. The result was a new product category that Amazon dominated before competitors even understood what was happening. This wouldn't have been possible with traditional consensus-building decision-making processes. Day one thinking also shapes how Bezos thinks about company culture. Most companies try to preserve their culture by codifying it in handbooks, processes, and policies. Bezos understands that culture preservation often leads to culture stagnation. Instead of preserving culture, he focuses on evolving culture while maintaining core principles. Amazon's leadership principles aren't static rules. They're living frameworks that evolve as the company grows and faces new challenges. This allows Amazon to maintain its entrepreneurial culture while scaling to over 1 million employees worldwide. For individuals, day one thinking means approaching your career and projects with startup urgency regardless of your company's size or your position in the hierarchy. It means making decisions quickly, experimenting with new approaches, and staying focused on creating value rather than protecting what you've already achieved. Day one thinking prevents the complacency that destroys careers and companies. It keeps you hungry, curious, and focused on what matters, serving customers better tomorrow than you did today. Core thinking pattern 3. Long-term thinking, building infrastructure for the future. While most business leaders think in quarters, Jeff Bezos thinks in decades. While competitors focus on this year's profits, Bezos focuses on next decade's possibilities. This long-term thinking isn't just strategic planning. It's a fundamental difference in how his brain processes opportunity, risk, and investment. Bezos doesn't just think long-term occasionally when making major decisions. Long-term thinking is his default operating mode. When he evaluates any opportunity, investment, or strategic direction. His first question isn't, what will this do for us this quarter? It's, what will this enable us to do in 10 years? This thinking pattern manifested early in Amazon's history. While competitors were focused on becoming profitable quickly, Bezos was focused on building infrastructure that would support massive scale in the future. Amazon operated at losses for years while building customer acquisition systems, logistics networks, and technology platforms that would eventually become competitive moats. Wall Street hated this approach. Investors demanded profitability. Analysts questioned Amazon's business model. Competitors mocked Amazon for buying revenue rather than earning profit. Bezos ignored the criticism because he was playing a different game entirely. He wasn't optimizing for quarterly earnings. He was building the foundation for decades of growth. Here's how long-term thinking shapes Bezos' decision-making process. Every major investment decision gets evaluated through what he calls the regret minimization framework. He projects himself forward 10 or 20 years and asks, what would I regret not trying? This framework led to decisions that seemed crazy at the time, but created enormous value over time. When Amazon launched AWS in 2006, most people saw it as a distraction from Amazon's core retail business. Why would an online bookstore start offering computing services to other companies? Bezos saw it differently. He recognized that the computing infrastructure Amazon built for its own operations could become a platform that other companies needed. Instead of keeping this infrastructure internal, he turned it into a service. This decision required massive upfront investment with uncertain returns. AWS lost money for years while Amazon built data centers, hired engineers, and developed services that customers were just beginning to understand they needed. Traditional short-term thinking would have killed this project multiple times. But Bezos' long-term thinking framework asked different questions. What if every company eventually needs cloud computing services? What if software development becomes entirely cloud-based? What if we could provide the infrastructure that powers the internet? The answers to these questions justified the investment, even when quarterly results didn't. Today, AWS generates more profit than Amazon's entire retail operation. It's worth hundreds of billions of dollars and powers a significant portion of the internet. This value creation was only possible through long-term thinking that prioritized future possibilities over present profits. Long-term thinking also shapes how Bezos approaches competition. Most companies respond to competitive threats reactively, trying to match features, beat prices, or copy strategies. Bezos responds to competition by thinking about what the competitive landscape will look like in 5 or 10 years and building capabilities for that future rather than today's reality. When traditional retailers started building e-commerce capabilities to compete with Amazon, most analysts expected intense price competition and margin compression. Instead of competing on price, Bezos doubled down on customer experience improvements that would matter more in the long term. Faster delivery, better recommendation algorithms, more product selection, and superior customer service. This strategy required short-term sacrifice. Amazon could have maximized profits by cutting customer service investments or reducing delivery speed commitments. Instead, Bezos invested more heavily in these areas because he understood that superior customer experience would create long-term competitive advantages that competitors couldn't easily replicate. The long-term thinking framework also drives Amazon's approach to new markets and product categories. Instead of entering markets to maximize immediate revenue, Amazon enters markets to learn, experiment, and build capabilities that might become valuable over time. Amazon's entry into grocery retail through Whole Foods acquisition and Amazon Fresh wasn't primarily about immediate grocery profits. It was about learning how to handle fresh products, understanding local delivery logistics, and building capabilities for the future of food retail. Similarly, Amazon's investments in healthcare aren't primarily about immediate healthcare profits. They're about understanding how technology can improve healthcare delivery over the next decade. This long-term thinking requires a specific type of patience that most business leaders struggle to develop. It means making investments that don't pay off for years. It means accepting criticism from analysts and investors who don't understand the long-term strategy. It means staying committed to directions that seem wrong in the short term, but right in the long term. Bezos has a framework for maintaining this patience. He focuses on what won't change rather than what will change. In retail, customer desires for lower prices, faster delivery, and better selection won't change in 10 years. So Amazon can safely invest in capabilities that deliver these benefits, knowing that these investments will remain valuable regardless of how the market evolves. This invest in what won't change framework provides stability and confidence for long-term investments. Instead of trying to predict exactly how markets will evolve, Bezos identifies fundamental customer needs that will persist and builds capabilities to serve those needs better than anyone else. Long-term thinking also shapes how Bezos approaches hiring and team building. Instead of hiring for immediate skill needs, Amazon hires for potential, curiosity, and the ability to grow with the company. This means hiring people who might be overqualified for their initial roles, but have the capacity to grow into larger responsibilities as Amazon scales. For individuals, adopting Bezos-style long-term thinking means evaluating career decisions, skill investments, and relationship building through a longer time horizon. Instead of optimizing for immediate salary increases or short-term opportunities, you optimize for learning, capability building, and positioning yourself for opportunities that might emerge over the next decade. Long-term thinking is ultimately about playing a different game than your competition. While others optimize for immediate results, you optimize for sustainable advantages. While others react to current conditions, you prepare for future conditions. While others compete in today's market, you build capabilities for tomorrow's market. This thinking pattern requires discipline, patience, and the confidence to ignore short-term criticism in favor of long-term value creation. But for those who master it, long-term thinking becomes the ultimate competitive advantage in a world obsessed with quarterly results. Core thinking pattern 4. Disagree and commit, the speed of unified action. One of the most misunderstood aspects of Jeff Bezos' leadership is how he handles disagreement and conflict within his organization. Most leaders either avoid conflict by seeking consensus or create dysfunction by allowing disagreement to prevent action. Bezos has developed a third approach that seems contradictory, but proves incredibly effective. Disagree and commit. The concept is simple but psychologically difficult. Team members can openly disagree with a decision during the discussion phase, but once a decision is made, everyone commits fully to making it successful, regardless of their initial position. This framework allows for better decision-making through diverse perspectives, while maintaining execution speed through unified action. Here's why this thinking pattern is so powerful. Traditional consensus-building processes often produce watered-down decisions that no one strongly supports, but everyone can accept. Disagree and commit allows for bolder decisions because the decision-maker doesn't need universal agreement. They need universal commitment to execution. Bezos himself frequently uses this framework. In 2013, when Amazon was deciding whether to produce original content for Prime Video, Bezos was initially skeptical. He disagreed with the strategy during internal discussions, questioning whether Amazon should compete with Netflix and HBO. But once the leadership team decided to proceed, Bezos committed fully to the decision, providing resources and support needed for success. The result was award-winning original programming that significantly increased Prime membership value. This success wouldn't have been possible if Bezos had continued expressing skepticism or provided half-hearted support after the decision was made. The disagree and commit framework requires a specific type of intellectual humility that most leaders struggle to develop. It means accepting that you might be wrong about decisions you oppose. It means supporting initiatives you didn't initially believe in. It means subordinating ego to organizational effectiveness. But disagree and commit isn't just about following orders after losing a debate. It's about actively contributing to the success of decisions you initially opposed. This means bringing your full effort, creativity, and problem-solving ability to making the decision work, even when you think a different approach might have been better. This framework dramatically improves the quality of decision-making discussions. When team members know they'll need to commit fully to whatever decision is made, they're incentivized to share their real concerns and perspectives during the discussion phase. They're also incentivized to think through implementation challenges and potential solutions rather than just criticizing proposed approaches. The disagree and commit principle also accelerates execution speed. Once decisions are made, there's no ongoing second-guessing, passive resistance, or behind-the-scenes undermining. The entire team moves forward with unified energy and focus, even when some members had different initial preferences. Bezos combines disagree and commit with what he calls strong opinions, weakly held. Team members are encouraged to develop and express strong positions based on their expertise and analysis. But they're also expected to change their minds quickly when presented with better information or compelling arguments. This combination creates dynamic decision-making environments where ideas are debated vigorously, but decisions are implemented smoothly. Team members feel heard and respected during the discussion phase, which makes commitment easier during the execution phase. The framework also applies to how Bezos handles board relationships and investor communications. Amazon's board and investors frequently disagree with specific strategic directions, especially those requiring significant upfront investment with uncertain returns. Rather than spending excessive time building consensus, Bezos seeks commitment to directions that align with Amazon's long-term vision. For example, when Amazon announced its intention to build a second headquarters HQ2, many investors questioned the complexity and cost of the public competition process. Bezos acknowledged these concerns, but moved forward with the strategy. Investors and board members who initially disagreed committed to supporting the process, which ultimately generated valuable data about hundreds of potential locations and created positive publicity for Amazon. Disagree and commit works because it separates decision-making from ego protection. In most organizations, people become psychologically invested in their positions and continue defending them even after decisions are made. This creates ongoing internal conflict and undermines execution effectiveness. The disagree and commit framework explicitly acknowledges that intelligent people can analyze the same situation and reach different conclusions. It treats disagreement as valuable input rather than personal failure. This removes the stigma from being on the losing side of a decision and makes commitment easier. For the framework to work effectively, decision makers must demonstrate that they're genuinely considering alternative perspectives, not just going through the motions of soliciting input. Team members need to feel that their views are heard, understood, and seriously evaluated, even when they're not ultimately adopted. Bezos ensures this by actively soliciting dissenting opinions, asking probing questions about potential problems, and sometimes playing devil's advocate for positions he actually supports. This creates psychological safety for disagreement while maintaining clarity about when discussion ends and commitment begins. The disagree and commit principle can be applied to any organization or team setting. It requires establishing clear processes for how decisions will be made, ensuring all relevant perspectives are heard during the discussion phase, and creating accountability for full commitment during the execution phase. For individuals, the principle means learning to separate your ego from your ideas, accepting that being overruled doesn't mean being wrong, and bringing your best effort to implementing decisions you might not have made yourself. These skills are valuable in any collaborative environment where diverse perspectives must be synthesized into unified action. Disagree and commit ultimately reflects a mature understanding of how organizations function effectively. It acknowledges that perfect consensus is often impossible and always slow, while providing a framework for maintaining team unity despite initial disagreement. This balance between diverse input and unified execution becomes increasingly valuable as organizations and challenges become more complex. Core thinking pattern 5. Working backwards, the press release method. Jeff Bezos has an unusual approach to innovation that reverses the traditional product development process. Instead of starting with technology capabilities or market analysis, Amazon starts with the customer experience they want to create and works backwards to determine what needs to be built. This working backwards methodology has become one of Amazon's most powerful innovation tools. The process begins with writing a press release for the product or service as if it already exists and has been successful. This press release must describe the customer problem being solved, the solution being provided, and the benefits customers will receive. If the team can't write a compelling press release, the project doesn't move forward. This might seem like a simple exercise, but it forces fundamental clarity about value proposition before any resources are invested in development. Most companies start building solutions and figure out the customer value later. Amazon ensures customer value is clear before any building begins. Here's how the working backwards process typically unfolds. The team writes a press release that could theoretically be published when the product launches. This press release must pass the "so what" test. It must clearly articulate why customers should care about this solution. If the press release feels boring, confusing, or incremental, the concept needs more work. After the press release, the team writes an FAQ document addressing anticipated questions from customers, internal stakeholders, and potential critics. This FAQ process forces deeper thinking about implementation challenges, competitive responses, and potential objections. Many projects die during the FAQ phase when teams realize the concept isn't as strong as initially believed. The next step involves writing a user manual or customer experience document that describes exactly how customers would interact with a product or service. This document forces concrete thinking about user interface, customer journey, and operational requirements. It's much easier to change a written description than to rebuild developed software. Finally, the team creates detailed technical specifications and implementation plans. By this point, the customer value proposition is crystal clear. Major implementation challenges have been identified, and the entire team understands exactly what success looks like from the customer perspective. This process has driven some of Amazon's most successful innovations. Amazon Prime began with a press release describing unlimited free shipping for an annual fee. The press release had to convince readers that customers would pay upfront for shipping benefits they might not use immediately. The FAQ process identified numerous implementation challenges, from inventory management to customer service complexity. But because the customer value proposition was compelling, save money and time on shipping, Amazon invested the resources needed to make Prime successful. The working backwards process ensured that Prime solved a real customer problem rather than just showcasing Amazon's logistics capabilities. Similarly, Amazon's recommendation engine started with a press release describing personalized product suggestions that would help customers discover items they'd love but might never find on their own. The FAQ process identified the artificial intelligence and data processing requirements needed to make recommendations genuinely helpful rather than obviously promotional. The recommendation system became one of Amazon's most valuable competitive advantages, driving billions in additional sales and improving customer satisfaction. But it started with a simple press release describing the customer experience Amazon wanted to create. Working backwards prevents what Bezos calls solution in search of a problem innovation. Many companies develop impressive technologies or capabilities and then try to find customer applications for them. This often results in products that demonstrate technical prowess, but don't solve meaningful customer problems. The working backwards methodology ensures that customer problems drive technology development rather than the reverse. This customer-first approach increases the likelihood that innovations will be adopted and valued by real customers rather than just admired by industry experts. The process also improves communication and alignment within development teams. Because everyone starts with the same press release and customer experience vision, team members can make development decisions that align with the overall customer value proposition. When trade-offs are necessary, the team can refer back to the original press release to determine which options best serve customer needs. Working backwards also forces honest assessment of market readiness and competitive positioning. The press release and FAQ process reveal whether the proposed solution offers meaningful differentiation from existing alternatives. If the team can't articulate clear advantages over current options, the concept needs refinement or abandonment. Amazon applies working backwards, thinking beyond product development to strategic initiatives, operational improvements, and organizational changes. When Amazon decided to build its own logistics network instead of relying entirely on UPS and FedEx, the initiative started with a press release describing faster, more reliable delivery experiences for customers. The FAQ process identified the massive complexity and investment required to build a logistics network from scratch. But because the customer value proposition was compelling, faster delivery times and better package tracking, Amazon committed the resources needed to compete with established logistics companies. The working backwards methodology can be applied to any innovation challenge, from individual projects to career planning. Before starting any significant initiative, write a press release describing the successful outcome from the perspective of people who would benefit. If you can't write a compelling press release, the initiative needs more development. For personal applications, this might mean writing a press release for the career change you're considering, describing the value you'll create for employers or customers in your new role, or writing a press release for the business you want to start, clearly articulating the customer problem you'll solve and the benefits you'll provide. The working backwards approach forces clarity about outcomes before clarity about methods. It ensures that effort is invested in solving meaningful problems rather than just exercising capabilities. It aligns teams around customer value rather than technical achievement. And it provides a clear success metric. Does the final result match the experience described in the original press release? Working backwards is ultimately about thinking like a customer before thinking like a developer, marketer, or strategist. It's about starting with value creation rather than ending with it. It's about ensuring that innovation serves human needs rather than just demonstrating technological possibilities. Core thinking pattern 6. Think big, start small, the scale paradox. Jeff Bezos has mastered a thinking pattern that seems contradictory. Think as big as possible, while starting as small as necessary. This paradox, simultaneously embracing massive vision and minimal viable execution, allows Amazon to pursue transformational opportunities while managing operational risk and resource allocation. Most entrepreneurs either think too small and limit their potential, or think too big and overwhelm their execution capacity. Bezos has developed frameworks for thinking at multiple scales simultaneously, maintaining expansive vision while focusing on incremental progress toward that vision. The think big component of this framework pushes beyond conventional market definitions and current customer needs toward fundamental human desires that transcend specific products or services. Instead of thinking about selling books online, Bezos thought about creating the world's most customer-centric company. Instead of thinking about cloud computing services, he thought about providing the infrastructure that powers the internet. This big thinking serves several purposes. It attracts exceptional talent who want to work on meaningful challenges. It justifies investments that seem excessive for smaller visions. And it creates strategic direction that guides tactical decisions. When team members understand the larger vision, they can make day-to-day choices that advance long-term objectives. But big thinking without small starting points leads to resource waste, execution complexity, and delayed market feedback. This is where the start small component becomes crucial. Instead of trying to build the entire vision immediately, Bezos breaks big visions into small experiments that can be launched quickly and refined based on customer response. Amazon's approach to artificial intelligence illustrates this thinking pattern perfectly. The big vision involves AI that can understand and anticipate customer needs better than customers themselves can articulate them. This vision encompasses recommendation engines, voice interfaces, predictive logistics, and automated customer service. But Amazon didn't try to build this comprehensive AI capability all at once. They started small with basic recommendation algorithms that suggested books based on purchase history. These early recommendations were often inaccurate and sometimes annoying, but they provided data and learning opportunities that informed more sophisticated approaches. Each small step, improving recommendation accuracy, expanding to new product categories, adding collaborative filtering, incorporating browsing behavior, moved Amazon closer to the big vision while generating immediate value for customers and learning opportunities for developers. This incremental approach allowed Amazon to develop AI capabilities organically, based on real customer interactions rather than theoretical models. It also allowed them to discover unexpected applications and use cases that weren't apparent in the original vision. The Think Big, Start Small framework also shapes how Bezos approaches market entry and business model innovation. When Amazon decided to enter the cloud computing market, the big vision involved providing computing infrastructure for every organization in the world. But they started small by offering basic storage and computing services to a limited number of early adopters. This small start allowed Amazon to understand customer needs, refine their service offerings, and build operational capabilities before committing massive resources to full market entry. Each service addition, databases, analytics, machine learning, IoT, expanded their capabilities while building on proven foundations. Starting small also provides what Bezos calls real-world feedback that can't be obtained through market research or internal planning. Customers interact with products differently than anticipated. Operational challenges emerge that weren't predicted. Competitive responses create new strategic considerations. By starting small, Amazon can gather this real-world feedback while the stakes are manageable and changes are still feasible. This learning can then be incorporated into larger-scale implementations, reducing risk and improving customer experience. The framework requires sophisticated thinking about resource allocation and timing. Big visions require significant long-term investment, but small starts require minimal short-term resources. Bezos has to balance between investing enough to make progress toward the big vision while not investing so much that small experiments become expensive failures. This balance is managed through what Amazon calls one-way door and two-way door decisions. Small experiments are treated as two-way doors, reversible decisions that can be changed quickly if they don't work. Big infrastructure investments are treated as one-way doors, irreversible decisions that require extensive analysis and commitment. The Think Big, Start Small approach also applies to talent development and organizational capability building. Amazon hires people who can contribute immediately to current projects while having the potential to grow into larger roles as the company scales. This allows Amazon to build organizational capabilities incrementally while maintaining current operational effectiveness. Similarly, Amazon builds internal tools and systems that solve immediate operational needs while being designed for much larger scale requirements. This prevents the need to rebuild core systems as the company grows, while ensuring that current needs are met efficiently. For individuals, the Think Big, Start Small framework means developing expansive career visions while taking incremental steps toward those visions. Instead of trying to transform your entire career immediately, you identify small experiments and learning opportunities that move you toward your larger goals. This might mean taking on projects that stretch your capabilities slightly, developing skills that support your long-term vision, or building relationships with people who operate at the level you aspire to reach. Each small step provides learning and credibility that supports larger opportunities. The framework also prevents the paralysis that often accompanies big thinking. When visions are overwhelming, it's easy to postpone action until conditions are perfect or plans are complete. Starting small creates momentum, and learning that builds confidence for larger actions. Think big. Start small ultimately reflects sophisticated understanding of how transformational change actually happens. Revolutionary outcomes typically result from evolutionary processes, many small improvements that compound into dramatic differences over time. This thinking pattern allows leaders to pursue revolutionary visions through evolutionary implementation. Core thinking pattern 7. High standards, the compound effect of excellence. Jeff Bezos believes that high standards are one of the most important cultural characteristics an organization can develop. But his understanding of high standards goes far beyond simple quality control or perfectionism. For Bezos, high standards are a systematic approach to creating compound advantages that become harder for competitors to replicate over time. The first insight about Bezos' approach to standards is that they're contagious, but not automatic. High standards in one area of an organization tend to spread to other areas, but only if they're explicitly communicated, consistently modeled, and continuously reinforced. This means that building high standards requires intentional effort and persistent attention from leadership. Bezos distinguishes between high standards that customers notice and high standards that only internal teams see. Both types matter, but for different reasons. Customer visible standards directly impact satisfaction, loyalty, and word-of-mouth marketing. Internal standards improve operational efficiency, attract better talent, and create competitive capabilities. For example, Amazon's packaging standards are visible to customers and create impressions about the company's attention to detail and care for customer experience. But Amazon's software development standards are largely invisible to customers while creating the technical capabilities that enable fast feature development and reliable service operation. High standards also require what Bezos calls teaching and learning, rather than just expecting and hoping. Most organizations set high expectations, but don't provide the training, tools, and feedback necessary for teams to achieve those expectations. Amazon invests heavily in helping employees understand what high standards look like and how to achieve them consistently. This teaching approach includes detailed documentation of best practices, regular training programs, peer feedback systems, and leadership modeling of standard-setting behaviors. Amazon doesn't just tell employees to maintain high standards. They show employees what high standards look like in specific situations and provide support for achieving them. The high standards framework also addresses the relationship between standards and speed. Many organizations assume that high standards slow down execution, requiring additional time for review, revision, and refinement. Bezos argues that properly implemented high standards actually accelerate execution by reducing rework, minimizing errors, and improving decision-making quality. When teams consistently produce high-quality work the first time, they avoid the delays associated with fixing mistakes, addressing customer complaints, and rebuilding damaged relationships. High standards become a form of operational efficiency rather than operational overhead. But achieving this efficiency requires what Bezos calls building high standards into the process, rather than inspecting quality at the end. Instead of reviewing work after completion to ensure it meets standards, Amazon builds quality requirements into each step of the development process. This prevents quality problems rather than catching them after they've already been created. High standards also compound over time through what Bezos describes as raising the bar, rather than meeting the bar. Each project or initiative should establish new benchmarks for quality, creativity, or efficiency that become the baseline for future work. This continuous improvement approach prevents standards from becoming static or complacent. Amazon's approach to hiring illustrates this bar-raising philosophy. Each interview process includes evaluators whose job is to determine whether the candidate would raise the overall capability of the team. Candidates who meet current requirements but don't exceed them are typically not hired, even when teams have urgent staffing needs. This hiring approach creates upward pressure on organizational capability over time. Each new team member brings skills or perspectives that improve overall team performance. This compound effect of talent improvement becomes a significant competitive advantage as organizations scale. High standards also require what Bezos calls disagreement with yourself, rather than consistency with yourself. As situations change and learning occurs, standards should evolve and improve rather than remaining static. This means being willing to acknowledge when previous standards were insufficient and implementing more demanding requirements. This evolution of standards prevents organizations from becoming trapped by their own precedents. Just because something was acceptable in the past doesn't mean it should be acceptable in the future. As capabilities improve and competition intensifies, standards must rise to maintain competitive position. The high standards framework addresses the psychological challenges associated with demanding excellence. Many people resist high standards because they create performance anxiety, increase work complexity, and raise the possibility of failure. Bezos addresses this resistance by connecting high standards to mission fulfillment rather than just performance evaluation. When team members understand that high standards serve customers and advance organizational mission, they're more likely to embrace the additional effort required. High standards become expressions of purpose rather than sources of stress. Amazon also addresses standard setting fatigue by celebrating achievement of high standards rather than just identifying failures to meet them. Teams that consistently deliver excellent results receive recognition, resources, and advancement opportunities. This positive reinforcement makes high standards feel rewarding rather than punitive. For individuals, adopting high standards thinking means taking personal responsibility for the quality of your work regardless of organizational expectations or peer performance. It means identifying areas where you can exceed current requirements and consistently delivering value that surprises and delights the people you serve. High standards also mean continuous learning and skill development to maintain and improve your capability to meet increasingly demanding requirements. As your industry evolves and competition intensifies, your personal standards must rise to maintain your professional relevance and advancement opportunities. The compound effect of personal high standards creates reputation, relationship quality, and career opportunities that become increasingly difficult for others to replicate. Excellence in one area tends to create opportunities for excellence in other areas, building career momentum that accelerates over time. High standards ultimately reflect a fundamental choice about how to approach work and life. You can aim for acceptable performance that meets minimum requirements, or you can aim for exceptional performance that exceeds expectations and creates lasting value. The compound benefits of consistently choosing excellence justify the additional effort required to maintain high standards. Daily mental habits: how Bezos structures his thinking. Understanding Jeff Bezos' thinking patterns is valuable, but understanding how he structures his daily mental habits provides the practical framework for applying these patterns consistently. Bezos has developed specific routines, practices, and systems that ensure his big-picture thinking translates into effective day-to-day decision-making. The foundation of Bezos' daily mental structure is what he calls protecting my peak hours. He's identified that his best thinking happens in the morning, so he guards those hours aggressively against meetings, emails, and routine administrative tasks. His most important decisions, creative thinking, and strategic planning happen when his mental energy is highest. This peak hour protection requires careful calendar management and delegation of urgent but non-critical tasks to other times or other people. Bezos would rather delay a meeting than compromise his ability to think clearly about the most important challenges facing Amazon. During his peak thinking hours, Bezos focuses on what he calls one-way door decisions, irreversible choices that will have long-term consequences for Amazon. These decisions require his highest quality thinking and can't be delegated or rushed. By handling these decisions when his mental capacity is strongest, he improves the quality of Amazon's strategic direction. Bezos also maintains what he describes as slow morning routines that prepare his mind for complex thinking. Instead of immediately diving into emails or urgent issues, he begins each day with activities that promote mental clarity, reading newspapers, having leisurely breakfast, and sometimes light exercise. This routine creates psychological space for reflection and deep thinking. The slow morning approach contrasts sharply with the reactive urgency that characterizes many executive schedules. By starting slowly and deliberately, Bezos ensures that his thinking remains proactive and strategic rather than reactive and tactical throughout the day. Another critical mental habit involves what Bezos calls wandering and wondering. He deliberately builds unstructured time into his schedule for exploration, curiosity, and serendipitous discovery. This might involve reading about fields unrelated to Amazon's current business, having conversations with people outside his normal network, or simply thinking about problems without immediate pressure to solve them. This wandering time often produces insights and connections that wouldn't emerge from focused, goal-directed thinking. Many of Amazon's most innovative ideas have come from Bezos's wandering exploration of seemingly unrelated topics that eventually connected to customer needs or business opportunities. Bezos structures his meeting schedule to support rather than undermine his thinking quality. He limits the number of meetings per day, insists on detailed agendas and pre-work, and frequently starts meetings with silent reading time where everyone reviews key documents before discussion begins. This meeting structure ensures that discussions are informed, focused, and productive rather than rushed, superficial, or repetitive. Bezos would rather have fewer, higher quality meetings than more, lower quality meetings that drain mental energy without producing valuable decisions. He also uses what he calls disagree and commit time blocks where he deliberately considers arguments against decisions he's inclined to make. This mental practice helps him identify blind spots, understand alternative perspectives, and strengthen his reasoning before committing to important directions. This self-advocacy role-playing prevents confirmation bias and improves decision quality by forcing him to engage with the strongest possible arguments against his preferred choices. If he can't effectively counter these arguments, he reconsiders his position. Bezos maintains learning disciplines that feed his long-term thinking capabilities. He reads extensively across multiple fields, not just business and technology, but also history, science, and literature. This broad reading provides mental models and analogies that inform his business thinking in unexpected ways. He's particularly interested in reading about leadership challenges in different contexts, military history, political biography, scientific discovery, because leadership principles often transfer across domains even when specific tactics don't apply directly. The learning discipline also includes regular conversations with experts in fields relevant to Amazon's current and future interests. These conversations provide early insight into technological trends, regulatory changes, and market developments that might impact Amazon's strategic options. Bezos structures his decision-making process to avoid what he calls decision fatigue. He's observed that making too many decisions in a day reduces the quality of later decisions. So he limits the number of significant choices he makes personally and delegates routine decisions to teams with clear decision-making frameworks. This decision conservation allows him to apply his highest quality thinking to the most important choices, while ensuring that routine operations continue smoothly without his direct involvement. He also practices what might be called temporal thinking, deliberately considering how current decisions will look from different time perspectives. He asks himself, how will I feel about this decision in 5 years? How will Amazon's customers and employees be affected by this choice over time? What second-order and third-order consequences might emerge from this direction? This temporal thinking prevents short-term optimization that creates long-term problems and helps him identify decisions that serve multiple time horizons simultaneously. Bezos maintains what he calls customer immersion practices that keep him connected to Amazon's customer experience despite his executive responsibilities. He regularly reads customer emails, participates in customer service interactions, and uses Amazon services as a regular customer would. This customer connection prevents the executive bubble that can insulate leaders from the reality of their customers' experiences. It also provides concrete inspiration for his big picture thinking by grounding abstract strategies in specific customer needs and frustrations. Finally, Bezos practices what might be called principle-based reflection, regularly reviewing his decisions and Amazon's performance against the leadership principles and thinking frameworks that guide the company. This reflection helps him identify when emotional reactions or situational pressures have led him away from his intended decision-making approach. These daily mental habits create the foundation for consistent application of Bezos' thinking patterns. They ensure that good thinking becomes habitual rather than accidental, systematic rather than sporadic, and sustainable rather than dependent on exceptional circumstances. For individuals seeking to apply similar thinking approaches, the key insight is that thinking quality requires intentional structure and protection. High-quality decisions emerge from high-quality thinking processes, and high-quality thinking processes require deliberate daily practices that support rather than undermine mental clarity and strategic perspective. Conclusion: applying the Bezos mindset to your own success. We've spent the last hour inside Jeff Bezos' head, dissecting the thinking patterns that built one of the world's most valuable companies. But understanding how Bezos thinks is only valuable if you can apply these insights to your own goals, challenges, and opportunities. The question now is, how do you take these mental frameworks and make them work in your own life? The first step is recognizing that these thinking patterns aren't unique to retail, technology, or large-scale business operations. Customer obsession applies whether you're serving external customers, internal colleagues, or family members. Long-term thinking improves career decisions, relationship building, and personal development. Working backwards clarifies goals and improves planning in any context. Start with customer obsession, regardless of your role or industry. If you're an employee, your customers are your colleagues, managers, and anyone who benefits from your work. If you're an entrepreneur, your customers are obvious. If you're a freelancer, consultant, or service provider, your customers are your clients. In every case, the question remains the same. How can you become genuinely obsessed with serving these people better? Customer obsession means shifting from asking, "What do I want to achieve?" to "What do the people I serve need me to achieve?" This shift in perspective often reveals opportunities and approaches that self-focused thinking misses. Implement the working backwards methodology for any significant project or goal. Before starting, write a press release describing the successful outcome from the perspective of people who would benefit. If you can't write a compelling press release, your goal needs more development. If you can write one, use it as a guide for planning and decision-making throughout the project. Adopt the disagree and commit framework for any team or collaborative environment. Practice expressing your views clearly during discussion phases while committing fully to group decisions during execution phases. This skill improves your reputation as both a thoughtful contributor and a reliable team member. Develop long-term thinking by regularly asking Bezos' regret minimization question. What would I regret not trying? This framework clarifies which opportunities deserve serious consideration and which fears deserve to be ignored. Project yourself forward 10 years and consider what your future self would want you to do today. Practice the think big, start small approach for any ambitious goal. Develop an expansive vision that inspires and guides you. Then break that vision into small experiments you can start immediately. Each small step should provide learning and momentum that supports larger future actions. Build high standards into your personal work processes rather than trying to inspect quality after completion. Identify what excellent performance looks like in your field and create systematic approaches for achieving that excellence consistently rather than accidentally. Structure your daily schedule to protect your peak thinking hours for your most important decisions and creative work. Like Bezos, Guard these hours against meetings, emails, and routine tasks that can be handled when your mental energy is lower. Develop what Bezos calls divine discontent with your current performance and results. Instead of accepting good enough, constantly ask, how could this be better? This mindset prevents complacency and drives continuous improvement in everything you do. Practice the day one mentality regardless of your experience level or organizational position. Approach each project with startup urgency and curiosity. Make decisions quickly when they're reversible. Take calculated risks for potential breakthroughs, and stay focused on creating value rather than protecting what you've already achieved. The most important insight from studying Bezos' thinking is that these patterns work because they align with fundamental principles of value creation, human psychology, and long-term success. They're not tricks or shortcuts. They're systematic approaches to making better decisions and building sustainable advantages over time. But remember that thinking patterns alone don't create results. They must be combined with consistent action, persistent effort, and willingness to learn from both successes and failures. Bezos didn't succeed because he thought differently. He succeeded because he thought differently and acted on that thinking consistently over decades. The principles you've learned today can transform your approach to work, relationships, and personal development. Customer obsession will improve your service to others. Long-term thinking will improve your decision-making. Working backwards will clarify your goals. High standards will improve your results. Day one mentality will maintain your growth. Start implementing one framework immediately rather than trying to adopt all of them at once. Master one thinking pattern, then gradually add others as they become habitual. The compound effect of better thinking, consistently applied, will create results that seem disproportionate to the effort required. Jeff Bezos built Amazon by thinking differently about customers, time, competition, and value creation. You can build your own success by applying these same thinking patterns to your own challenges and opportunities. The frameworks are proven, the principles are transferable, and the potential is unlimited. Your journey inside Jeff Bezos' head is complete, but your journey applying these insights is just beginning. The question isn't whether these thinking patterns work. Bezos has proven they do. The question is whether you'll have the discipline and persistence to make them work for you. The tools are in your hands. The principles are clear. The path is mapped. Now it's time to think like Bezos and build like Bezos. Your success story starts with your next decision.